All right. Everybody, thanks for joining today. Just to let you know in advance, this is being recorded and we will share this across multiple platforms. I see we have participants from Phoenix and other people as well. So thank you for joining. Today, we're going to talk about best practices within the SAP Ariba deployments. Let me share my video with you. Sorry, let me share my screen with you. And right now, you should be able to see my presentation. Dustin, can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Great. So we will talk about these best practices. I'm going to let you know in advance. This isn't every best practice that you can imagine when you're doing this type of work, but it's some of the key best practices that you want to make sure you follow and make sure you're aligned with. So at the end of this presentation, we have a little QR code that you can click on or with your phone or whatever and give a survey and maybe even tell us about more sessions that you would like us to run. We're going to be running these sessions monthly or quarterly, depending upon participation and interest. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let me tell you a little bit about Phoenix Consulting for those who aren't with our company. We are a full SAP Gold partner that manages several different products, but frankly, we have a plethora of SAP experience and commercial experience with not only state and local government customers, but also commercial customers. So we offer several different types of services and software, all the way from SAP by Design all the way to Business One. We are focusing today on SAP Ariba. Now, I will say this, that many of these lessons and best practices, leading practices, will apply to all of this other software and other software outside this realm. So while I speak about Ariba specifically, this is transferable to any type of software implementation. You can feel free to stop me at any time for questions, or we can take questions at the end. I have no issue with either one of those. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and why we're doing this today. I've been in this process and product for about 25 years as not only a solution architect and solution expert, but also a practice leader, which is where I serve now. I've implemented over 30 successful Ariba projects, all the way from single source modules all the way to the full suite products. I'm certified in all Ariba modules, and I'm a procurement and AV process expert. And I always want to make sure I design with the end user in mind. That's why I use a consultative approach. And again, I also am very, very experienced in change management training. So whatever questions you ask me today, reference to those things, I should be able to answer. If not, we'll get an answer for you. So what we're going to be covering today again is Ariba implementation best practices or leading practices. Not all of them, but key ones to make sure that your implementation stays on track, on time, under budget, and reduces risk. We're also going to talk about some specific implementation risks that always come up and how to avoid those. And then at the end, we'll have Q&A unless we have a Q&A on the way. Dustin, I think we have a couple comments in the comment section. Is that right? Or
Yep,
maybe not.
those were just initial ones, just asking about audio. We're all good now, but I will be keeping an eye on the Q&A, so if anyone does have questions, I'll be sure to let you know.
Great, thank you. So let's just dive into it. What are some of the leading practices that a customer wants to make sure they adhere to when they're putting in Ariba software or any software? Simplify and standardize. That is one of the key tenets, and this should be built into your project charters for all of your projects. You need to adopt a why not standard. You need to challenge your end users to find out, why can't this work for you? SAP Ariba is a cloud-based platform, which means it's hosted on a platform that has other tenants as well. It's multi-tenant, but it's also pre-configured with about 80% of what procurement, sourcing, and contract officials need. So the question is, why won't that work for you? And usually you get the answer, well, that's just not how I always done it. So technology should support the process, but the process needs to be simple enough that any end user can use it. Because if it's not simple, they will find a way to go outside the process. Now, why is that important? Because within the procurement realm, customers and the implementers take a lot of time to negotiate pricing terms on contracts. I want to buy from Staples, and if I buy $10,000 worth of Staples equipment, I'll get a 2% discount. Now, if I have no way to tie that to actually to the contract with technology, I may not be able to get that advantage. So all that work has been done for nothing. So it needs to be done as simplified and standardized. It also allows your customers to be able to operate the system in a more organized fashion across the platforms. So if somebody's using sourcing and then goes to procurement, it should have the same look and feel such that they can use it very easily. Everybody here has used Amazon.com. And with Amazon.com, you go in there, buy something, you put in your shopping cart, you go about your business. It's that simple. That's what SAP Ariba does as well. But it will only do that if you standardize and simplify. In the past, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when we had a lot of behind the firewall software, you can do whatever you want, modify it however you want, many iterations over multiple years. But what happens is when you go to upgrade that, it's a train wreck because you had to not only upgrade the base package, you also have to upgrade all those needs, wants, and desires. So SAP Ariba has done a really good job of giving 80% of what you need already. So we want you to challenge anybody who says, I can't do it that way. Secondarily, this has to be value driven. We need to align the business case with the drivers for the business because people do stuff in their own best interest. And when I say value driven, I'm not talking about at the organizational level. I'm also talking about at the personal level. If a person or a business unit sees the value in the product, the value in the process change, they're much more likely to adapt it. So you need to make sure that when you're talking to your internal customers, not only you tell them the who, what, why, where, and when, but the how, but more importantly, the why. Why are we doing it this way? What benefit is there for you, end user? It should make your life simpler. It should be easier to track information, and it should be easier to audit information. So you've got to really connect with the end user and keeping the end user in mind. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But also, and let me give you a real good tip. No one does this. You need to baseline your information in the prepare phase or prior to that. What do I mean by that? You need to find out what you spend or how many sourcing events you run or how many contracts you process now before any technology is put in. Because what you should see once the technology is put in, you should see an increase in productivity on sourcing contracts, and you should see less spend being violated through the procurement process. But you wouldn't know that unless you actually measured it first. Because you always remember, you get what you measure. If you don't measure it, you don't know if you're improving or you're regressing. So that's a very key driver. I recommend everybody document that prior to your prepare phase or in the prepare phase. Moving on, you need to have a strong governance and PMO. Now, you may say, hey, Loyd, that's table stakes, and it is. But as many times I've seen that, if your PMO is not involved, and they don't have to be involved day to day, but if they're not involved, they don't have the ability to knock down barriers and resolve conflicts. But they need to provide the vision. We work in a very collaborative society and very collaborative organization. So there's no mandate to say, hey, you will do this. And you don't want that mandate. You want a collaboration. You want teamwork and partnership. And you can only get that by having a strong communication. But senior leadership is key because having a strong design review board and a strong CCB, change control board, will help control scope creep. And scope creep is one of the main risks you're going to see. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But if you have a strong DRB and CCB, they will see through the fear, uncertainty, and doubt and be able to direct that appropriately. Let me give you an example. If I'm in S4 and I'm putting in S4 public cloud and I want to add a field for XYZ, I'm the only one who wants to do it. It doesn't affect anybody else in the organization, but it's going to cost time and money on scope creep. That needs to go to the design review board to validate if it's a correct design. And then it needs to go to the CCB to make sure that we either catalog appropriately or put it in a backlog or reject it wholly. Now, I may have 10 people with the same issue. That may change the calculus on the approval process, but it still needs to go through the approval process to make sure we're not violating the rules of the contract and scope creep. Additionally, focus on data early, specifically with your supplier base. And again, I'm talking about procurement specifically. With your supplier base, you need to make sure that you reconcile your supplier base prior to your implementation. If you don't, and you don't have to, that's just another step you have to do later. Why is that important? Because when you're talking about procurement, all of your trading partners and suppliers need to be fully vetted. They need, example would be, do they have their OSHA certificates? Have they had any OSHA violations in the past 12 months? Do they drug test their drivers? What's their policy for doing business with any country that's on the banned list, or, Iran, Yemen, whatever. So unless you have that validated, you'll have to do that later, and then it takes time in a project to do it. So you want clean supplier data specifically before you go into it. You also want your clean data around your chart of accounts, because again, the larger the organization grows through mergers and acquisitions or just natural growth, the chart of accounts will change and grow and become diluted. So you need to pull them all together. And this is a great time to do it prior to your implementation. But also, this is very, very important. Content is king. Content's king. I'm gonna do a webinar on that later on this year. But what I'm talking about is, if you were to get into a car and it had no gas in it and it had no GPS or map and you didn't know where you were going, that car is 100% useless. So when you're talking about a procurement process or any type of technology, you need to have your users trained again and evaluated. And then you need to make sure your users know the why, obviously, and can communicate that why to their training partners, because the trainer partners need to be trained. They need to know the why, they need to know the timeline, and more importantly, they need to know the value. But again, content is the biggest driver. Do you have your necessary templates around sourcing and contracts and supplier management built, ready to go? And do you have your catalogs and contracts and suppliers enabled in your procurement tool? Now, this is day one go live. Does that mean you need to have all of them in there? Absolutely not. Another leading practice is to have your minimal viable product set up and then have your suppliers, your content, and your catalogs for a certain user base day one. Now, if you're in a large organization and you have multiple business units or state agencies or things of that nature, you can roll them out eventually, but you need to have that initial supplier base contracts and catalogs ready to go. Otherwise, you have a tool with no gas in it.
Got a question in here, Loyd. Good one here. They asked, and it's in two parts. Should the DRB and the CCB also be established in the prepare phase before moving into the explore phase?
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
okay. Keep going. I'm sorry, Dustin.
yep, the second part to that was just, I assume also that the data reconciliation should be exit criteria for exiting the prepare phase.
Those are really, really good points. Best practices right now. A DRB and a CCB, those are generally reserved for larger projects. So you don't have to have those, but you need to have a strong steering committee. And that steering committee needs to resolve issues, knock down barriers, and provide that vision. CCBs and DRBs are usually used for large S4 implementations, but you can use that. Regardless of that, absolutely, you need to set that up day one. Additionally, the data should be the exit gate from your prepare phase. Now, it could be design phase as well, but more importantly, it's got to be done prior to build phase. And the reason that is because the build is going to be relying on data to be tested appropriately. So if you don't have your data squared away, your testing will fail. So prepare phase is a great gate, at a minimum, mid design phase. That makes sense? Okay, so again, most importantly, communicate early and often, overcommit to your internal and external trading partners, because you're going to have a bunch of common pushbacks. The new process isn't flexible enough for me. Well, we need to align the vision and the impacts and design the system process and show them throughout the process. Demonstrate, 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 and then one more time, demonstrate again, because they don't know they don't know the new process. They're going to see it and they're going to balk immediately. But by seeing how it works and getting their feedback, you'll get more adoption and ownership from those people. Why is it better what I do today? That's the same thing as saying, well, that's not the way I've always done it. Again, you need to show the impact and the vision to the actual end user. It's better today because now, Mr. Hawkins, you can create more sourcing events in less time and be more effective. That's going to accelerate your strategic sourcing plan implementation as well. So it is good for you, sourcing manager, and this is why it makes it easier for you. It allows you to evaluate and award and select an award contract, or excuse me, suppliers much faster. I care about speed. Prudence is faster. Depending upon the customer, and most customers are still doing RFPs. They'll send out RFP in a Word document. So this our tools allow you to do it faster. When it comes to procurement, it's much faster. It's an Amazon.com experience. They give you freedom without choice. You're allowed to buy what's on the catalog and contract, and maybe marginally outside of that. But you don't have to go. You don't have to call your supplier and then look for a supplier, make sure they're vetted. It's all in there, and all your content's in there already. If you follow the tentative day one content creation, I control it the way I do it now. Again, that's hey, I don't want to change, right? So again, communicate early and often and the value of it. And make sure you coach the leaders who can discuss those benefits. Because what you don't want is Loyd Hawkins complaining to Dustin Loge and Dustin saying, hey, I don't know anything about it either. I agree with you. This helps procurement, but not me. Well, let's show them how the catalog simplifies processes within the business, right? You have the ability to create a non-catalog item and a catalog item or a contract. And when you show that it's an Amazon.com like experience, they've all used it. We've all used Amazon. We've all had very little training on Amazon, if at all. So we will want to bring that process to our internal and external training partners. So I've lost some control with how I communicate with my suppliers. This is a big one. The purchasing doesn't have a relationship with most of the suppliers. The business units have a relationship with their suppliers. So it's key to prepare those business units for that pushback internally and externally. They will still have their communication with their suppliers. As a matter of fact, when you use these tools on a tactical level, that communication is documented and auditable. But when you communicate the value of the process to your suppliers, then you'll have more control and you're not going to lose any control. Key to what I'm saying here, though, is that communicate value. Communicate value. Again, we live in a society that's much more collaborative than mandatory. And if you communicate that value, you'll get more buy-in. Now, will you get some people say, hey, I don't care, I don't like it? Absolutely. And we'll have to just deal with those as we come. But as you show these people how this makes their life better, which is what I talked about 2 slides ago, show them how it makes their lives better, they'll be a lot more accepting. So let's talk a little bit about risks. These are very, very important. And we need to learn how to avoid these. So I'm going to talk about 7 key risks. And if you look on the left side, you see the impact and the probability. But one of the big key risks is the global template lacks global representation. What do you mean by that, Loyd? Well, if I'm putting this into Merck, big pharmaceutical company, or Organon, big pharmaceutical company, and I only talk to 1 or 2 business units, when I go to those other business units, they're going to say, hey, A, I didn't know anything about this. B, this is not how I can't do it this way. And C, now I'm mad at you because you're putting something on me that I didn't even know about. So you need to have a representation from each business unit that you're implementing to. Does that mean it need to be in every meeting? No. What it means is that as your core Tiger team builds the process, modifies the process, and builds a product and then demonstrates the product, you can bring the other representation in to review what you decided upon. And at that point, they can say, yes, I like that. I like 1 through 5. I don't like 6. Now, am I the only one in the entire organization that doesn't like 6? Maybe. So we talk about the change control process. But if we have several of them that may say, hey, we may have designed it without enough information. So always bring in your representation as much as possible. Do these guys have full-time jobs? Absolutely. Is this their highest priority? No. But make it easier for them to attend, have strong meeting notes, and again, demonstrate the solution as you build it as much as possible using the SAP Activate methodology or Sprint methodology. Here's a big one, scope creep. Scope creep is where you have a certain set of parameters, deliverables, activities, and priorities set aside for the project. And then someone says, wait a minute, I need more. And that tends to cascade through a lot of people. I need more, I need more, I need more. Is the answer no, you can't have it? No. The answer is let's take a look at the scope, see if it fits within there. Maybe we need to take something out, or maybe we need to put it in a backlog and address it later. But You got to make sure that you don't have a whole bunch of nice to haves, which is number 3, and it goes right into scope creep. Because we don't want to tell our customers, and our customers are our internal users and our trading partners. We don't want to tell them no. They don't want to hear no. They want to hear their issues, and they want to hear their issues are being heard. So what we will do is we'll hear those issues. We'll delve into those issues. Are they real issues? Are they cosmetic? Or are they nice to haves? Or are they mandatory critical? And if they're critical, we'll address them. But if they're nice to haves, medium or lows, maybe we can do them in another phase. Because what we can't have, and I've seen this many times, is analysis paralysis. You keep designing, you keep designing, you keep designing until you can't get the sign off. And then when you go into testing, you keep designing and building. Well, then you're never going to get to where you're going to get, and you're going to have low customer satisfaction. So always be aware of scope creep and the delay in your schedules. And it all comes from an increasing number of nice to have from local processes. Number 4 is a really big one. And all these are really big, but number 4 is big as well. Lack of cohesiveness between different teams during the various stages. So you're going to have your integration team, your technology team, you're going to have your change management team, you're going to have procurement, you're going to have the AP, several other people. And mainly you're going to have business units doing their job the way they've always done it for years. And you got to make sure those teams are cohesive. You got to have a strong lead PMO, like we talked about, and you got to make sure that you have people with the mindset of change. Because if they don't have that mindset of change, they're never going to get you where you need to go. So make sure you have that. Make sure you have strong governance. Make sure you have quality gates, like someone mentioned, as for data as you leave your prepare phase, and make sure you have strong integration management, because the integration team is just as important as the process team, and we want to engage them early and often, which means you need to make sure that you have the subject matter experts available when you need them. How do we do that, Loyd? You do that through early planning to ensure availability. And when you reach out to your key stakeholder, it's not, hey, come to this meeting. It's here's an agenda. And in that agenda, we have who needs to attend, what we're trying to accomplish, when it happens, and how we're going to manage that. And more importantly, why we're doing it. So the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why, and how. And I'll put an H in there as well. So make sure you have that plan early and often, because we don't want these people surprised saying, hey, I wasn't aware, I wasn't invited, or I didn't know why I needed to come. Because again, they have competing priorities, like in risk number 4. Here's a big one that a lot of people don't think about, but a CIO thinks about: in-flight projects or customer blackout dates. So when you're talking to your to your internal partners, the CIO, the CFO, the CPO, people of that nature, the business units, they may be doing something else, and putting in S/4HANA, which needs to align to this, or maybe they have a end of year close date or end of quarter close date where they can't be involved in testing. Well, we need to know about it, but we're not going to know about it unless we establish a plan early and validate it often. And the last one, and this is a big one as well, I talked about the 3 things you need when you go live: content's king, users train, content, suppliers train. Now, supplier management is not a project. Supplier management is a program that needs to be adhered to throughout the entire time that you're in business, because suppliers are going to come, suppliers are going to go, and suppliers are going to change. So if they don't adopt a new Ariba solution, you're losing one of the legs to that stool. So if you don't have suppliers to buy from in the system, so your users will go around the system and buy under normal, unnecessary and inefficient buying channels. So make sure you have a supplier management team that's strong and that is capable and communicates the value as much as possible. So those were.
Loyd, just got another question in here, just asking, can you solve risk number 1 and risk number 2 with a very comprehensive and signed off business requirements document? And should that document be required when exiting the prepare phase?
So that's a great point. You need to have a strong project plan, and I'm talking about a detailed project plan, and then you need to have gates for that. 1 and 2 so 1 and 2 will. So let me rephrase that. 2 and 3 you need to manage throughout the process. So let me give you an example of those 2. I'm in my design phase, and I want A, B, C, D. At the end of the design phase, you get sign off, right? Once you have that sign off of your design, there are no changes to the design, none, because it's signed off. Because what's signed off in design has to be built and build. And if you keep designing in build phase, you'll never get to your testing phase. So that's extremely important. You have to have sign off on each gate. Now the global template should be done at the end of design phase too. So I wouldn't say prepare phase, I would say design phase for both of those. But at each gate, prepare, design, build, test, and run, you need to have sign off. And once you have that signed off, unless there's some national calamity that we didn't catch, then there's no changes. Does that mean there'll never be changes? Absolutely not. There will be changes, but those aren't part of the process today. Those are part of phase two. I hope that answered your question. Great. So this is what I wanted to talk about today. We had 45 minutes for this. Like I said, I'm going to show you a QR code here in a minute. What I encourage you to do is absorb this, take it back to wherever you're from, implement it when possible, and take those notes. Now, I'm available here at Phoenix Consulting to answer those questions ad hoc if you'd like. If you're having an issue and you say, hey, let me call Loyd Hawkins at Phoenix Consulting. There's a point of contact down here. Call me. We'd love to chat with you, because at the end of the day, whether you're an implementer or you're a customer, it's all about customer success. It's not about what we do, it's about what we give you. And we want to make sure that we give that to you in a format and method that is acceptable, absorbable, and actionable. That way you'll have a great outcome. So, any additional questions before we wrap? Okay, if there's no more questions, like I said, there's a QR code down here. There's our phone number, and just you can email info@phoenixteam.com. I appreciate everybody's support. I love the questions. I hope this was value to you. And if you need any more of it, we're more than happy to chat. With that, this is the end of the presentation. I guess we can stop the recording and then we can go about our business. But again, thank you so much. Look at the QR code there to do the survey, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the future.